This is it, the final review for the Rave Master Manga series. It's been quite an adventure with Haru and the gang. I'm Christopher Moldong, the author of the fantasy adventure novel The Mustard Prince in the Condiment Kingdom. You can buy this novel for $4.99 on my author's website at www.chrismoldong.com on PDF format, or if you have an e-reader such as a Kindle, you can buy it for $4.99 on Amazon.com. From my author's website or Amazon.com. You can also buy my short stories and short story collections for only $1.99, such as the fantasy horror short story, The Land of the Wooden Statues, my horror collection, which is a compilation of 3 of my gothic horror short stories, and my fantasy fable collection, which is a compilation of 4 of my fantasy fable short stories. Many of my stories are actually inspired by anime and manga such as Rave Master. For these reviews, there will have spoilers. I will first recap the events of the volumes, and after that, I'll give my own thoughts on the events that transpired. Also, follow me on Twitter and like my author's page on Facebook. Links to all these will be provided on the description. So, in Volume 30, Haru was chasing after Russia and her kidnappers using Sophirian. On Volume 31, he's still chasing after them. Russia actually gets a cut on her arm from one of the kidnappers, and that same cut forms on Ellie, but it's like a healed cut. It's not a fresh cut, but it is there. Haru manages to save Russia, and Plu is actually captured as well it's Plu from 50 years ago. Russia makes it back to the village to dance, but King Malachi, Haru's grandfather, seems to know that something happened. And then an old couple says that Russia will be killed, and with royal approval. Haru then hands the kidnappers over to Robin, the leopard knight. And everything seems all fine and dandy, but then Ellie realizes that Russia has her pendant. Sieghart is not happy with this. It has information about the current time, so Haru and Sieghart try to retrieve the pendant. As they're doing that, they both listen in on a conversation between King Malachi and the elderly couple, who said that Russia's going to be killed. And they talk about Endless. Sieghart says that the couple appears to be a tattoo artist and a prophet. King Malachi says that if it will destroy Endless, he is willing to kill Russia. So on September 9th, which is apparently September 9th is the day that time intersects. That's when the 2 Gales fought, when Overdrive happened, and whatnot. King Malachi will kill Russia. The popular truth about Russia Valentine is that she died on September 9th by overusing Etherian, to create the Rave Stones. Time advances to September 9th for Haru and Sieghart. Ellie and Plu go to Russia Valentine's home, and Ellie says that she remembers everything. Back in with King Malachi and Russia has a knife, and they're shown in a room together talking about Russia dying. King Malachi also has a tattoo on his right eye, or that area around his right eye. Russia then declares that today is the day that she died and cuts off her hair, revealing that she looks just like Ellie. Going back to Ellie, Ellie gains her memories back and reveals that she is indeed Russia Valentine. Russia Valentine from the future, apparently. So in a flashback, King Malachi the tattoo is called a fate. so the fate is on his right eye, tells Russia that she must fake her death. King Malachi reveals that he has obtained a fate where he'll leave behind a descendant to support Russia, and he will name him Gale. Gale, or Gale's son, will further assist her. Um, Ellie, not Russia, but like Ellie, uh, almost reveals herself to Shiva, who believes that Russia died, but Haru stops her. Uh, it turns out that the old couple were actually Saga Pendragon and Sonia from Acapella Island. Saga Pendragon's the one that keeps talking to Haru through the through one of the raves. A time rift forms that Sieghart explains could take them to any time, but Sieghart pushes them into it while he controls it to get them back to their era. Sieghart allows himself to stay on the year 0015. That's the time period that they're at in the past, while Haru, Ellie, and Plu return to their time. Sieghart then decides to do absolutely nothing so as not to disrupt time. Russia Valentine, now disguised as Ellie, visits Russia's grave with the pendant from the future. Sieghart approaches her and asks for that pendant back, and she gives it to him. Sieghart then sits on the rock near Russia's grave wearing the pendant, and in the present it is revealed that the skeleton that was seemingly just kind of sitting there in front of Russia's grave in the present is indeed the skeleton of Sieghart. So, back in the present, Shakuma almost destroys the Air Mildian, but Musica, Belnica, and others fly on these small sorcery fighters called Rune Wings. Shakuma then destroys the skeleton. Ellie uses Aetherian to defeat Shakuma, who wants this parallel world to disappear. So he gets injured by Ellie's Aetherian, and while badly injured, figures out that Russia Valentine is Ellie and is still alive. He reveals that King Malachi assumed the alias of it's different in the Tokyo Pop version. It's like Kaim, but then like in the Kodansha version, it's Kamu, Caamu. I'll call him Kamu, and that he killed Kamu, who's actually King Malachi. Um, so at the end of the volume, Shakuma provokes Ellie. He actually gets on top of her and urges her to use Aetherian while she's in this like emotional state. So in volume 32, Shakuma reveals that he is Shakuma Raregroove, Lucia's grandfather. With a condensed Aetherian infused into the 10 Power Sword, Haru and Ellie defeat Shakuma. Shakuma reveals that Lucia does not know of his identity and then melts away. Haru and Ellie then bury Sieghart's skull. In front of Russia's grave, Haru asks that everyone promises that no one dies from here on out. So they go to the... Well, they don't go, but they show a shot of the Demon Card headquarters, and Lucia gathers the Demon Card troops and uses the Endless Darkbring to get rid of them all. Megiddo then joins in, and destroys everyone too. Elsewhere, at an auction, a woman in Mystic Realm Permafrost, like this giant block of permafrost ice, is being auctioned off. She awakens, breaks out of the ice, and freezes the entire town. The woman turns out to be one of the 4 great demon lords, Jero of Despair. Elsewhere, at the major northeastern power, Arumdan, an enemy army that isn't human, led by one of the 4 great demon lords, Ashura the Jet Black, attacks and obliterates an army there. At the major military power Balania Federation, one of the four great demon lords, Eternal Uta, and he has this gigantic sword. I mean, I mean, you think, it's the size of a building, pretty much. Destroys. He pretty much destroys a city and an army. So on the Air Million, Ellie is trying to combine the Rave Stones. Musica is reading the book that Galen Musica gave him, which is his grandfather, but reads something that makes him throw the book down in like surprise. He then gets Neville to take him back to Punk Street on a rune wing, but he rushes there and doesn't tell the others. When Neville and Musica get there, um, the whole town is frozen, including Galen Musica. Musica reveals that the book says that the 10th form of the 10 powers does not exist. Uh, Musica wanted his grandfather, Galen, to forge the last sword, but since he can't, Neville tells Musica to forge it. But Musica's never actually forged a sword. He's not a blacksmith. He's a silver claimer, but not a blacksmith. Musica, so he's trying to make this sword. He agrees to it. So as he's like making the sword, he reveals that the 10 power sword is a sword made specifically for Sheba. So Sheba was the only one who could use all of its forms. Also, Sheba was able to control Sakafar, but Haru could not because he was not the original owner of the sword. So they kept questioning why, like, oh, how come there's a demon sword in Sakafar? It's like, no, there actually wasn't. Um, it's just that Haru could not control that particular form of the sword. So after many failed attempts at forging, Musica uses his silver claiming to forge the sword. He uses a drop of the bonded silver from him, from like his silver, which is a skull, and Reina's silver, which is like that snake, and gets a drop of that. Musica makes, and he does make the 10th powers, the Holy Blade Rayvelt, and in the process melts the ice of the house / forge that he's in, including unfreezing Galen Musica. Haru and the gang go to Punk Street. Let and Julia figure out that the only one who could freeze the city is Jero. Haru finds Musica lying on the floor of like the house. Musica is in what seems to be something like an afterlife or dream sequence where he meets up with Reina, but he eventually awakens. So what happens is that he gives Rave out to Haru, and even without the Rave connected to it, the city gets unfrozen from its power. Elsewhere, General Jade, who's the brother of Jigen, and he's one of the four generals of the Imperial Army, goes to Rebellia, the village of the dance, but it's covered in fog. There he meets Evermary, and Evermary tells him that it's not fog, but memory dust. Um, so back to like the forge or like Punk Street. Galen Musica tests Rayvelt by striking it with the 10 powers, and the 10 powers shatters. He says that like the soul of the sword can now rest uh, now that it's shattered and be in heaven with Sheba. So they fly off on the Air Meridian, but the memory dust overtakes the Air Meridian, and Shida reveals that it can wipe away memory. Ellie combines all the Rave Stones into one, and that in itself disperses the memory dust in the process. At the end of the volumes, of the volume, they're at a town, and they pretty much just all party, and in this drunken situation, Haru reveals that he loves Ellie, but can't say it to her face. So, on volume 33, so if you bought like the US versions like I did, It started out with the Tokyo Pop versions, and they came out with volumes 1 through 32. Volume 33 through 35 was uh, brought out by Kodansha Comics in an omnibus format. So some of the names are changed and whatnot. Um, the Tokyo Pop version called the special area Star Memory. Kodansha Comics has it as Stellar Memory, for example. So let's begin. Uh, so Haru, so after they party, Haru goes out and he tries to stop Lucia himself. So he's trying to get on his the airship by himself and stop Lucia. So Ellie, she pretty much knows what's going on and waits for Haru, knowing that he'll try to do everything himself, and she joins him. He asks, uh, he actually asks her once the fight is over, "What do you say we move in together?" And she actually agrees. From there, the rest of the group actually heard that, and they all join him to fight against Lucia. Suddenly, air meridian and memory dust envelopes the group. They reach what looks like this black hole, and Lucia is inside of it. And the Deadbringer army comes out of the black hole and attacks Haru and his group. Pretty much, it's these inhuman walking armor. Um, They defeat them easily, but there's just no end to them. So suddenly, a whole fleet of ships helps out Haru, and they all turn out to be old friends and former enemies of his, including the Resistance, who's writing the Liberal Familia with Julius, Yuma, Nagisa, Lazenby, and all those guys. Then the Sacred Barrier unit with the false Remy Maltese is also uh, a part of those ships. The Knighthood of Rebellia with General Jade and Evermary is in one of the ships. Rosa and Go, the guy who was like a director and producer or something like that, from early on, helps him out. And then Reina's army of lady warriors also helps him out too. And then on top of that, the Silver Rhythm Gang, which was Musica's gang, also helps him out. So they all, you know, all the old friends come back and enemies to help Haru and the gang. Milton appears and tells them that each of them received a letter 50 years ago about this battle from none other than Sieghart. And pretty much that's how they all appeared together at the same time. So as that battle's going on, they enter the black hole, and it's pretty much like the Star Vestige Cavern. Uh, Lucia sends one of the four demon lords, Asura the Dark, to attack Haru and the group. He then captures Ellie and destroys the ship, which separates the group. Haru then chases after Asura. Julia and Belnica confront Jiro. And then as Haru is trying to chase Ashura, Uta, the guy with the giant sword, is blocking his way. But Let and Musica fight Uta so that Haru can go and just get Ellie. And then Boy Boy, who was the familiar of Burial, who was hiding out in Ruby's hat, he comes out of that hat and attacks him. Attacks Ruby. So Belnica and Julia are fighting Jiro. Belnica uses the Infinity Evasion technique to evade any attack from Jiro. Jiro then uses a technique called Winds of Despair against Julia and Belnica, which makes him face this huge despair and makes him suffer and hurt and whatnot. And then Nebels, he joins them, but he doesn't fight quite yet. He's just kind of like a spectator. Belnica then makes the Winds of Despair disappear, but leaves her open to get attacked. Jiro shoots a beam at her that makes a large hole in Belnica's stomach, so it injures her badly. But Belnica, who's badly injured, grabs hold of Jiro and commits to this kamikaze attack that nearly ends Belnica's life. However, Jiro does not get defeated from it. So they show a flashback with Nebel talking to Seek Heart, talking about transformation spells, and one in particular that will cost Nebel time. So after that happens, a blast, just one blast of like light or energy or whatever, attacks Jiro, and apparently Nebel uses the ultimate transformation spell that will cause his mortal body to age at a rapid rate, but he will gain enormous power. So you actually see Nebel older and getting older, but just being the super strong like wizard or sorcerer. Julia, while Jiro's fighting Nebel, Julia manages to get up, actually kisses Jiro, but that was actually to use a special attack called Drought of the Fire Dragon to attack her internally, and Jiro is then defeated. Belnica presumably dies, and so does, and Neville becomes an old, like this really old man, and you see him and like they're unresponsive. Um, and Neville presumably dies too. I forgot to mention Griff was kind of like there. He was just a spectator during the whole time. Julia and Griff remain alive. So elsewhere, Let and Musica fight Uta, and Let tells Musica to go while he fights Uta alone. So, like, to go to Haru while he fights Uta alone. And then Let and Uta fight one on one, and Let uses Call of the Dragon to summon the power of the Dragon God at the cost of his own life. So at the end of the volume, Uta gets punched by Let, and he decides to fight in his like demon form. So he wasn't even in like his like final form. It's his demon form. So in volume 34, Let becomes a dragon, but not just any dragon, but the king of the dragon race, Java, king of dragons. Apparently, Let was actually a king all along. Java Let Dahaka, the dragon king. He apparently refused to abandon his soul and humanity so that he could live as a mortal, as like a normal mortal being. Let defeats Uta, but as a dragon, but Let also seemingly dies too. Then elsewhere, Haru catches up to Ashura, and Ashura assumes his true form as the king of demons and holder of all Darkbring. He becomes this like large demon whose body is totally studded with Darkbrings. He's just covered with Darkbrings all over his body. He puts Ellie into this orb and pretty much like consumes the orb through his mouth. So I guess like Ellie's like inside of her now, and then he has to beat her in order to release Ellie. So Ashura uses multiple Darkbring powers and tries to use one that will turn Haru's body to stone, but Plu with his nose destroys that Darkbring that would have turned Haru to stone. Um, so during this battle, like Rayvelt falls to the ground, Ashura grabs hold of Rayvelt, the Holy Sword, and tries to destroy it, not knowing exactly what it is, which is kind of surprising. He didn't actually like realize that it was like the sword of the Rave Master. Um, so what happens is he tries to destroy it and he throws it. He kind of like throws it away. Um, then multiple Darkbrings on Ashura's body get destroyed, and Haru, using Rayvel, slices Ashura and defeats him. Ellie is then freed from Ashura. Uh, Lucia appears and takes Ellie, and Lucia, well, Lucia appears too for the purpose of taking Ellie, but Haru briefly fights him. Megiddo then appears and just badly injures Haru as Lucia takes Ellie and retreats. Uh, Lucia says that he's pretty much waiting for overdrive to happen to destroy the world. So Megiddo can blow this gigantic fire from his mouth. It's like the flames of hell. And he's about to blow this fire to kill Haru, but Shuda appears and disperses the fire. Because Shuda's also like a person that's like really strong against fire and uses a lot of fire like attacks and whatnot. And then Shuda fights Megiddo. So Megiddo uses an attack called Ultimate Flame, but Shuda stands his ground to take the attack because Haru, who's pretty much injured and fallen, is right behind him. Um, so Megiddo uses the Ultimate Flame, or like the Flames of Hell, and Shuda cuts through them using Gale's sword, Gale Glory sword, and he slays Megiddo with that sword. The ground underneath them collapses with a sea of fire below. Megiddo falls into it, and Shuda is about to fall into it, but Haru saves him, similar to the scene when they first fought, where he's grabbing his arm for dear life. In like this scene of total deja vu, Shuda is about to cut off his other arm, but doesn't, and then they get back to stable ground. Musica finds a fallen but not dead Shuda, who tells him that Haru has gone off to chase after Lucia. Lucia puts a bracelet on Ellie. And then Lucia and Ellie look at the Endless Darkbringer. It's kind of hovering at one spot. And Lucia says that it'll bring the Endless Overdrive. It keeps growing too. Lucia says that as it destroys a parallel world, they will go on to the real world. Ellie then tries to destroy Endless, but it turns out that the bracelet is a magic defender. So, Musica finds a fallen Haru and attempts to carry him to Ellie. Ruby, who is being chased by Boy Boy, catches up to Musica and Haru. Musica uses his silver to defeat Boy Boy. Ruby has a bottle of elixir that he wants to use on himself, but Musica takes it and uses it on Haru. A giant beam of light comes out from the Endless Darkbringer, and that Endless Darkbringer tells Lucia to kill Ellie, because Ellie is like the only one that can destroy him, or destroy like Endless. Haru then, he's fully recovered, along with Plu, chases after Lucia, and then an army of Deadbringers, along with the Deadbringer General Glavitus, heads to where Haru is, with only Musica and Ruby standing in their way. So elsewhere, as Lucia is about to take Ellie's life, Haru appears and jump kicks Lucia. At the end of the volume, the author actually gives an explanation of what Russia was doing for those 50 years. So apparently, Kamu and Ellie disguised themselves and boarded a ship claiming that she was his sick daughter. There was actually a scene with Shiba giving away his like boarding pass to this ship to this one man and his daughter. So it actually connects as he's talking to no, not Shiba, excuse me, Galen Musica and his assistant give away their like boarding pass to the ship to this man and his sick daughter, who turns out to be King Malachi and Russia Valentine, now Ellie and Kamu. Ellie, now Russia's calling herself Ellie, so Ellie's memory was just totally wiped out. So the author explains that in the year 0015 at the Ethereum Research Center, Ellie uses a spell to freeze her body for 50 years. She wrote her name Ellie and her village's coat of arms on her arm and slept in the underground basement level. At the year 0045, Belnika's parents were working at the Ethereum Research Center. presumably on Belnica. Uh, so Ellie was right there who could use Ethereum, uh, ironically enough. So in the current year, 0065, uh, or not the current year, but in the year 0065, Ellie wakes up with no memory. And that's where she sees Sieghart, and Sieghart, like, uses lightning on her. So, we're on to volume 35, which is the final volume. Okay, so Shuda appears before Musica and Ruby and tells them that he'll handle all the dead bringers alone. So Haru and Lucia fight, and Lucia reveals that his body has merged with Endless. Ellie finds this like sharp piece of metal and attempts to remove the bracelet. She then stabs her own arm. Musica comes along and stops her from causing further damage to herself and uses a silver claiming to destroy the bracelet. Musica then hands Ellie the time space staff. I was actually I don't think they actually explained that Musica had the time space staff the whole time. Uh, so while this happens, Lucia absorbs Haru into the monster form of Endless. So Haru's now inside of Endless. So alone inside of Endless, Haru and Lucia fight each other one-on-one. So they're fighting each other inside of Endless, and it appears to be the Tower of Din, where their fathers fought each other. And then Lucia explains that Lucia and Haru, they're fighting in this place because their memories have combined to create that particular landscape. Haru then realizes that he is in stellar memory inside of this holy star, and he was in there the whole time. Endless then becomes its true form, which is like this monstrous, this giant monster type guy. So Lucia and Haru are still fighting, and they pretty much just, as they fight, they argue over like the real world versus the false world. As this happens, Lucia stabs Haru through his body. Lucia then explains the history of the world, explaining that there was a woman called Arcella, who was the last survivor of the real world after that world was destroyed. She turns out to be Arcella Raregroove, Lucia's ancestor. Arcella manipulated time by using stellar memory to go back to a time when humanity still flourished. From there, the parallel world was formed. So after that, he explains that to him. Haru is still able to stand, and they continue to fight. Lucia explains that he feels that he's born with cursed blood, and that it is his destiny to destroy the parallel world, and that's all he has. Like, that's the whole meaning to his life. Lucia then uses the 10th power of his sword called Dark Amelia to finish Haru. So outside of that battle, rubble and everything is just like collapsing. Like, you know, the world's like kind of coming to an end. You know, things are collapsing and whatnot. Yeah. Musica is protecting Ellie from pretty much all the rubble that's happening, or that's like crashing all around them. Haru fights against Dark Amelia inside of Endless, with everyone calling out his name, and he defeats Lucia. Lucia breaks apart and vanishes in front of Haru. But the last thing he actually tells him is, Haru, it's all up to you now. Which is really interesting, actually, because, you know, it makes you actually kind of wonder, is like, did he, at that very last second, become good or not, or something with that, like, with that message. So Haru tries but is unable to get out of Endless. Then he pleads with Ellie to use Ethereum with him still inside of Endless. Ellie uses the Ethereum after both say I love you to each other. It's a pretty sad moment right there, actually. So Musica and Plu, they run to Ellie, with Plu handing her Haru's necklace after she used Ethereum, right? But Ellie doesn't remember anything, including who Musica and Plu is. So, on September 9th, day that time intersects, year 0067, every last Darkbring was destroyed, and the curtain finally closed on Rave and Darkbring's War of the Stone. A year passes by, and it shows Ellie in a skull uniform with Plu on her head. So it's September 9th, 0068. Once again, the day that time intersects. And Ellie is in a school in the town of Etana. Um, Muska and Griff are waiting for Ellie in this car. So they get in the car. Muska drives them to Ruby's casino, Idol Lake Casino. Julia apparently works at the casino but is already causing problems. Let appears and is apparently still training but has no job. Baunica and Nebel also stop by the casino. So they all get on a flying ship and reminisce. They wonder how they were saved. Was it by Aetherian or was it by Rave? They don't really know. Then they show Haru's grave with Shuda standing in front of it. He has a lot more hair now on his head. So the area that they had the final battle became a star-vested island, and that's where Haru's grave is. They bring Ellie to Haru's grave, and it's revealed that none of them has brought up Haru to her. So from this clutter of crystals, a beam of light shoots into the air, the crystals break, and Haru comes out of it, pretty much dressed the same way he was when he fought Lucia. So memory dust swirls into the air, and they realize that the stellar memory saved them all. Seeing Haru, Ellie gets her memory back and embraces Haru. So some of the last scenes show Garage Island. Ellie, Haru, and Plu are on a raft heading towards Garage Island. Catalia, Haru's sister, is in front of Gale and Sakura Glory's graves. Catalia sees Haru and says, "There he is." They show the four of them on Garage Island. So the final two scenes, they show a church. But the very last scene, it's a picture with Haru and Ellie, apparently married. But everyone else is in suits. The guys are in suits. The women are in dresses with them. And that pretty much ends Rave Master, the main story. They also had these side stories called Levin Minds House, or in this Kadanta version, it's called Home Alone with Levin. And Levin was turns out to be Haru and Ellie's son. But in the final Home Alone with Levin, Levin has no memory. His parents, Haru and Ellie, come home, but Levin's face appears to be that Nakajima. Nakajima then says, "Now Levin-sama is one of us." So that's the end of the Levin is Home Alone series side story. And then they had a final afterword from the author. The author reveals that the Dark Amelia, Lucia's final sword, was going to see more action. Amelia was, I didn't remember this, but Amelia was Lucia's mother's name, King's wife. He was also going to make certain moments longer, but he couldn't. And apparently Nagisa and all the members of the Resistance go to the same school as Ellie. And yeah, that's actually it with everything with the Rave Master manga. Some things to note, my own personal thoughts here. We finally get the big payoff with finding out about Ellie's memory. Ellie's Russia Valentine, and they explain how they faked Russia's death and all that stuff, and that was really interesting. I thought that was actually pretty neat and well done. It was it wasn't one of those oh, that's it, type of things. I think you can kind of put the pieces together. Ellie was Russia Valentine, but they explain how that actually comes to be, and actually how that comes to make sense. This end to Seaheart was pretty sad, actually. He's such a well-liked character. Who was one of the very few characters to find growth in the whole manga series. He was this guy that was so obsessed with protecting time that he'd kill anyone, and then later on, he like cares about his friends. The skeleton being Sieghart was also a nice surprise. Uh, there's this really big mystery of whether or not Sieghart was in love with Ellie. I mean, the events at the end of his like journey hint that he did indeed love Ellie. It's like he's like, oh, that pendant came from someone very dear to me, and it's like, you know, it's weird. I don't know if he loved Ellie or if it was just deep friendship or what. It's tough to say because they had enough interaction, but not enough personal interaction to make it seem like, it was love. But like that end, you know, near the end of his journey when he's asking for the penance, it really does make it seem like he loved Ellie. But it's one of those things that we'll never truly know. It's good that Shakuma was so difficult to defeat. He's just so strong. Um, he was just so obsessed with ending the whole parallel world. Um, Personally, it just seems so strange to me that these villains take such issue with this whole parallel world thing. It's like, oh, we live in a parallel world. It's not the real world. Okay, let's destroy the world then. It's like, because we're not real, apparently. It seems so, like, it seems almost absurd, but, the villains need some sort of motivation, so I get it. It just, I explained it before, but as the reader and the protagonist, they're like, oh, who cares? That's a parallel world. Like, no one cares. No one feels any less real or anything because it's a parallel world, but the villains take such issue with it. We finally see the final form of the Ten Powers, Rave out. It's good that they acknowledge why Haru could not control Sakafar. And it really made sense for Musica to create the sword instead of Galen Musica. I didn't actually, it's kind of funny. It's like, yeah, I didn't actually think of Musica creating the sword when I first read it, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, huh. He's a silver claimer, descended from a blacksmith. Oh yeah, it totally makes sense. That final battle with everyone coming back together, like the old friends and foes, joining together to fight against the Deadbringers. I mean, I've seen that in other anime, manga, movies, whatever. It never gets old with me. I mean, it's just one of those things. I love like old characters reuniting and then like fighting against the bad guys. I've always found that pretty awesome. I actually use that in the Monster Prince and the Convict Kingdom. Actually, it's never gets old to me. I always thought it's always fun to see old friends. Having Sieghart sending letters to everyone was also a nice touch. It just showed that he was still fighting with them. The four demon lords were indeed powerful enemies, but it does kind of beg the question, like, when did all the protagonists get so strong? It's kind of like, man, it's like, Shudo was having a hard time with, like, Deep Snow. Now he's, like, killing Megiddo, It's like, when did you get, when did you get so strong? But, it's a total, like, shonen thing. I like Nebel. I've always liked the Nebel character. He's this like precocious kid. It's hinted that he could surpass Sieghart. It was actually a really cool spell. That transformation spell was actually really cool that he used. I did find Let being like the Dragon King a bit far fetched, just because like they never really hinted at it. It's just like he was just some guy. I mean, they showed some flashbacks with him and Jigen. It's like he didn't live in a castle or something. Like he like lost to Jigen. It's like how's he the Dragon King? It just seemed a bit far fetched right there. I did like Uta being a Let's opponent though, because Let also was a character that found some real change as the series went along. Because when he started out, he's like, "Oh, I'm just looking for strong opponents and whatnot, looking for the fight." And then becomes a more caring individual, and Uta is still very much like what Let you like started out like. I really liked Ashura and Megiddo. You know, they seem so powerful and whatnot, but they seemed a bit too. They were defeated a bit too easily, in my opinion. It seemed like pretty much every character was prepared to sacrifice their lives, and some did, like Nabo, Belnica, Let, and Haru, who all presumably died until Stellar Memory revived them. Shuda and Mizuko were also more than willing to sacrifice their lives as well. Which goes against the whole like, hey, no one dies, and everyone's all like, nah, we're gonna sacrifice our lives for this thing, you know. Uh, at the end, Lucia was, in my opinion, they tried to make him a sympathetic character. I couldn't buy it. I understand that he had this like brutal upbringing. He was imprisoned for years. Parents died in front of him. He almost died himself and whatnot. But like, and they tried to make him a bit sympathetic, but it was kind of hard for me to really sympathize for him, just considering what he's done. You know. Um, the 1 year later to year 0068 was actually really interesting, and then it seemed like the world moved years into the future, not just 1 year, but years into the future, with it being like closer to our world. Like they have schools like ours and whatnot. Musica drove a car when I don't particularly remember them ever driving cars up until that point. The school where Ellie goes seems like a departure from the world as well. They still had they had airships. Back, back in like 0067, and they always rode airships. But it just kind of seemed like they went from like this medieval world to this really modern world in just 1 year's time. Uh, the ending was a really happy ending, which is something that the author apparently planned. Uh, the way that the story moved, though, I couldn't imagine a sad ending, even though everything seemed a bit far fetched and ended a bit too perfectly. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, Stellar Memory is going to revive everyone. Okay, like, done. But at the same time, it's like, that wouldn't be cool to have, like, Haru dead the whole time, you know? So, like, yeah, a bit far fetched for me personally, but a little too perfect in a sense, but at the same time, it's the right move to do. They didn't actually explain if Shida was still with Gatalia or not, but I assume they are. I'm also surprised that they didn't really go with anything with Nagisa and Musica getting together. So, overall, the Rave Master manga series was a really highly enjoyable adventure. I know after this, Hiro Mishima made Fairy Tail, which is, I believe, still ongoing. It's very popular. In Rave Master, there was a good amount of twist, really good action in the story. I liked most of the characters. Many were particularly unique and drawn in a way that were very much distinguishable characters. So I mean, it's a really fun adventure. I've actually reread Rave Master quite a bit, a couple times, and it's just a lot of fun. It's one of those ones that is really easy to reread, and it doesn't really get old. Good characters, good, solid enough story. Can take a manga series really far and just make it really enjoyable. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the manga reviews for Rave Master. Thanks for joining me through this. And join me as I review the next manga series, one of my favorites, Basara, which is 27 volumes long. Love this series. It's actually one of my like top three favorite like manga series of all time. Um, and also, I gotta plug some of my stuff, so you can buy some of my works, starting with my first novel, an action adventure called The Mustard Prince in the Convent Kingdom, which is actually inspired by a lot of manga and anime. for $4.99 on my website at www.chrismaldon.com on PDF format. Or if you have an e-reader, you can buy it on Amazon.com for $4.99. You can also buy some of my short stories and short story collections, such as The Land of the Wooden Statues, my horror collection, and my Fantasy Fable collection, and they're all just $1.99 each. So that's pretty much it for these manga reviews. Thank you guys very much, and join me next time.